Okay.
Hey, what's up? This is Wilsfer with Abysmal Hymns, and today I have with me Reza Mills, who also writes with me for Ghost Cult magazine, as well as Sleeping Shaman and Clean Sheets. So we're gonna talk about one of our favorite subgenres of music, which is post-punk, and give you our five favorite albums from that genre. So first off, I guess, what is post-punk? If you don't know, I don't know why you clicked on here, but a good hint would be so it's a derivative of punk. It came after that first initial wave of the 1977 punk bands. And I always thought of like Velvet Underground as like kind of the forerunners of it. But it's darker and more there's more tension and less attitude and aggression like punk. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that description?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's interesting actually because whether it's the hardcore scene in the US or whether it's the 77 Britpunk scene, obviously those bands were direct to the point, like that raw fist in the face. The post-punk bands that came after still kept elements of punk, so the DIY aspect, the we're going to do exactly what we want sort of thing, but it was far more nuanced and experimental. And it was really what's more punk than fucking with people's expectations, right?
Right. For sure. So how about starting us off and giving us your first album?
Sure. Okay, shall we go in descending order?
I'm not putting mine in order just because that would be
Oh,
like an
okay.
OCD nightmare. So I'm just the five that have like I've listened to the most and matter the most to
Okay.
me.
Sure.
Yeah. So there we
Okay.
go.
I'll go from five to one anyway. So the first one I've got here now, ooh, does it count as a post-punk album? I think it does. I've actually got the Wipers, Youth of America. So the Wipers obviously started off, their first album, Is This Real, was obviously a huge influence on Nirvana and bands like that later on. It was very three-chord punk. But Youth of America, oh my God, that track in and of itself, it's like 11 minutes of weird backward noise, vocals that are incomprehensible, experimentation, almost krautrock elements in there. It's possibly one of the most amazing songs I've ever heard. And Greg Sage was a guitar genius. You also got a song like, sorry about that, then my phone just went there. Yeah, you've got other songs on there too, like When It's Over, which is just bizarre. It's dark as well, and which is a key component of post-punk. So that was my number five.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. The Wipers should definitely be in the conversation more
Mm,
about it for sure. And I think that it's another thing is there are a lot of post-punk bands that kind of started off as punk bands
mm,
and then just kind of matured, and I,
sure.
I think that's the case with those guys.
I mean, also, can I just very quickly just chime in there that I would have included these guys. I sort of see their progression similar to the Wipers, that you have someone like Howard Devoto from the Buzzcocks was on their first EP, which was, kind of snotty pop punk. And then he went on to a band like Magazine, who were like mind-bogglingly weird. I mean, he's a strange guy anyway, but completely out there. So I sort of see the Wipers progression in a similar trajectory, if you like.
Right. I could see that. I can see
Hmm.
that for sure. So my first album that I'll bring up is so for me, I had to like disqualify goth albums, because I think there's a difference. Like
Hmm.
post-punk is more about tension and both, I mean, goth came out of punk as well, but
Hmm.
I kind of see like goth also added like psychedelia and like the Doors kind of romanticism into things. So so certain albums like bands like Christian Death, I definitely kept out of the conversation. But this album kind of borders. It's
Hmm.
Swans, White
Ooh,
Light from the Mouth of Infinity.
wow. Yep.
And although it's more melodic than like their earlier stuff, I
Hmm.
think that it does have that tension and darkness and still has the kind of the early rawness and emotional tension that their early work had, but it was, just kind of fleshed out more.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree. Couldn't agree with you more there. Actually, I think well, post-punk. What's interesting about Swans is they actually started off as an all-out post-punk band with their very first EP.
Right.
And then they went down that weird industrial route, which is cool. I love that stuff. And then they really started to branch out, um, maybe adding, I suppose they call it post rock now, don't they? But elements of that and romanticism. They covered Love Will Tear Us Apart until we get to that album that you mentioned that sort of brought it all together.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure, for sure. All right, what else you got?
Okay, now I know you said about goth. I count this as a post-punk album. Now I actually put 17 Seconds by The Cure. Now, I'll explain why. So, goth to me is Sisters of Mercy, The Mission, Fields of the Nephilim, the bombastic theatrical stuff that came later on in the 80s, from the mid 80s onwards. And the kind of stuff that you roll your eyes at and you're like, oh God, here we go. Someone else dressed in black, reading Edgar Allan Poe, you know, doing that silly dancing. The Cure aren't like that. The Cure really developed from this very sparse type of wire band on Three Imaginary Boys. And then they developed this really bleak sound on 17 Seconds. It wasn't quite goth yet. It had some of the atmospherics. It wouldn't be quite as over the top. I mean, Bob, bless him, didn't quite develop the bird's nest hairdo at that stage. He looked like Ben Affleck, if anything. And you had songs like A Forest, which were very synthesized and I think very similar to Joy Division. I mean, if you listen to an album like, I suppose, Closer and 17 Seconds, I'm not saying they're the same, but there's a commonality between them.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, totally. So I will kind of pick up with that and say, so The Cure is one of mine, too, but for me, the album was Pornography,
mm,
which is where you're starting to get into that more romanticized darkness. But I think it's so heavy
mm,
that it still is a post-punk album. I think when they really crossed over, obviously, was Disintegration. But
yes.
the guitars aren't tense anymore. They're very lush. Great album, nothing wrong with that.
Mm,
It's just a different mood.
mm,
And I think that, there's plenty of songs on, I think, both albums that you might hear on an 80s night or a goth night.
mm.
But they're really, I think the Pornography is kind of like that's where the line's drawn, and that was where they were still post punk before, the songwriting got a little poppier, and not as poppier as a bad thing. I think he just, really honed in on melody.
Absolutely. In fact, after that album, was it trying to think, what was it? Banana Trombones, was it that song? That weird psychedelic record they did.
Right, right.
The Top, is it called, I think?
Yep.
They started to veer off into that, and then the much hated, if you're a true Cure fan, Love Cats and all that sort of thing. But you can sort of understand, if you're producing bleak stuff, I mean, it doesn't get much bleaker than Pornography or Faith, for goodness sake. You'd think, yeah, you probably just want to lighten the tone a tad. So you can sort of understand why you would go that route. Personally speaking, I like it when they're a bit darker and gloomier, but I also have an appreciation of the pop stuff too.
Right. I mean, he didn't just get his castle in Scotland for nothing. He obviously made a living out of it, and you got to have the Love Cats
Yeah,
to make the other music.
sure.
I think that that's the compromise. And I never saw it with them as like selling out.
No,
It was
no.
just the next logical step.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for goodness sake, I mean, I think at that stage, I'm sure he talked about, was he suicidal at one point? He was having some mental health difficulties and he was feeling mired in this stuff that he'd been writing. So he probably thought, just for his own mental health, crikey, I better change tack a little bit here.
Right, right, right. Yeah, and I think that, that's the thing about any great band that has a lengthy discography is that you're going to get different moods on different albums.
Mm, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that one.
All right, what else you got?
Me, okay. So, staying in England, my homeland, of course, I've got the mighty, the brilliant Susie and the Banshees, and this one is Join Hands. And the reason for this, so basically, it's one of their albums that tends to get overlooked. Now, again, people lump them in with goth, much like The Cure. They weren't a goth band. They came out of Susie came out the Sex Pistols crowd, the Bromley contingent, as they called it. And so I never saw them really as a goth band, strictly speaking, because I didn't feel they were ever cliche. They were more influenced by stuff like, I suppose, the Velvet Underground, Sparks, um, Lou Reed, John Cale, and people like that. Oh, and the Doors, I suppose, as well. And so Join Hands is an interesting record. It's got like 7 songs, so it's not a tremendously long record. But for me, it has songs like Playground Twist, which, oh my God, that is a heavy song, emotionally and otherwise. But it's also got a track called The Lord's Prayer, which is just like 14 minutes of, I don't know what it is. It's just weird chanting. It's a bit like the Damned's curtain call in that respect. You know what I mean? Like this really drawn out song that just goes on and on and on. Hey, what's more experimental than that?
Right,
So that's
right.
my choice.
I mean, I definitely agree with that. I mean, Susie and the Banshees would have been on here,
Hmm,
but they tend to be, obviously I tend to go for albums more like Superstition and
sure.
that type of thing. And every time I saw Susie and the Banshees on the first Lollapalooza.
Oh,
I guess that was like 92 or 93. That's a hazy time.
yeah.
But they struck me as like a goth band, obviously, at
Hmm,
that time. And then
sure.
later I saw that tour she did. I want to say it was 2004, maybe,
Hmm,
where it was like it was Susie and the Banshees, and then she also did songs with Budgie.
yeah.
Um, and that
Oh,
felt
the
like
creatures.
yeah, with the
Yeah.
creatures. So
Yeah.
that definitely felt like more of a goth show too. So that's
Hmm.
how she's kind of lumped in my brain. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely she's part of the conversation because she, like you said, she's definitely came out of the punk scene
Yeah.
before there was even goth was really anything more than people that were invading in medieval times. But
Or
so
in England, it's the Whitby Goth Festival in Yorkshire, which is
oh
full
yeah,
of vampire bats and all that sort of stuff, which
I
I don't,
watched that on YouTube, and I
yeah.
one year I got to make it over for that for
All
sure.
right. It's fun. I mean, the thing is, I'm not sure if I would go to it because it's a lot of stuff like Fields and Nephilim, which isn't quite my thing. But yeah, I suppose maybe as an onlooker, it would be an interesting thing to watch.
It feels the Nephilim play. I will definitely go.
Yeah, I would
Uh,
probably.
they're not on the list, but
No.
another band I know that we both like
Sure.
is on the list, and
Okay.
it is "Nighttime" by Killing Joke.
Yay.
Um, which and I was kind of torn with this album. I was listening to some of the earlier
Hmm.
stuff, and I was like, no, this is the album that matters the most to me. And really, when I listened to it, um, aside from Love, Love Like Blood, I think that it's not. It's just a more melodic evolution of their sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's not as much of the pounding tribal stuff on it, which is great, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think they had smoothed out their songwriting on this album, and that's probably why I've listened to it the most.
It's a great record. Actually, it's funny you should choose that one because my girlfriend, I got her into Killing Joke probably. She only knew Love Like Blood. That's the only song by him she knew. And I went, man, you've got to really do some digging. There's got such a massive catalogue. And of course, you've got 80s on there as well, haven't you? Which
Right.
is every documentary in England about the bloody 80s plays that song. And it's a good song for what it is. It's just a bit, yeah, okay. It's all right. It's got a cool video, but it's not my favorite. But yeah, Love Like Blood's great. You're right. I mean, they did go down a poppier route, and I think it showed another dimension to their work. They weren't just this apocalyptic, scary band, that they could have melody and things like of that nature. And jazz can actually sing really well.
Right.
So, yeah,
And I
great.
think they had to do that because
Yeah,
then that opened them up to be able to incorporate those elements into the stuff that would come later on.
sure. Absolutely, man. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, great record.
Cool. All right. What else you got?
Okay, well, talking of Killing Joke, I think we've got a snap here because this time I've actually gone for Brighter Than a Thousand Suns. I'm always the sort of guy who will go for the albums that get overlooked a little bit. And it was the one that came after Nighttime, of course. And I probably, for me, Adorations is like one of the most beautiful songs of theirs. I just, every time, I just think it's just heartbreaking. And it's just so tender as well. It's a really overrated, underrated record. Of course, after this point, Killing Joke, when it really got really into syncs, and of course, Big Paul left. What's his name? Raven, rest in peace,
Mhm.
left as well. But I think this record was really a really underrated piece of work. And as I say, Adorations is like one of my all-time favorites by them.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Swans kind of went, Killing Joke went into the opposite direction that the Swans did, where Killing Joke ended up as a
Mm.
industrial band, where the Swans started off as more of one.
Yeah.
Um, and funny enough, the first album I bought by Killing Joke was Pandemonium,
Yeah. Same, actually. Same. Yes.
which is a brilliant album. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just too industrial for me to talk about it here.
I know.
Um, but I had heard about them obviously through Metallica,
Hmm.
and so I loved The Wait.
Yeah.
But when I went to the record store, that was the album that they had, and so it's like bought a promo of it for like $5, and there we went.
Yeah, because I remember hearing Pandemonium at uni. I think a mate of mine had actually bought it. I'd never heard of them. And he brought this album and he put it on. And then he had bought the self-titled debut. But he first played Pandemonium. This was in the late 90s. And I listened to it and I thought, what is this? So it has these weird Arabian scales and like, but I was like, this is really good, really good. And then I started to explore their work a little bit further. I mean, I had some terrible taste back then, some really bad taste in music. Some would say I still do, but especially then, I mean, look, I'm gonna like, I take myself a bit too seriously sometimes. So here, enjoy it. My last shred of dignity. I bought the first three Limp Bizkit albums.
Okay.
That's how bad my taste in music was at that time. So,
Well, I
yeah,
mean, I don't know. I came out of the like just into metal. Like the first
yeah,
albums I listened to were like Kiss
yeah.
and uh Ozzy, Bark at the Moon, and Alice Cooper. So
Oh,
that, which were not a far cry from that. Then I got the first like non-metal album I bought was the Labyrinth soundtrack
okay.
because I was a
Yeah,
little
Bowie.
kid.
There's Bowie,
Yeah, so then that's
Okay.
when I got into David Bowie, which
Yep.
brings us to the next album,
Oh, okay.
which is the self-titled Tin Machine album.
Oh, wow.
The
Okay.
the first Tin Machine album, which doesn't get brought up enough when we talk about post-punk, but I
No.
think that's what that album is. I mean, it sounds like a Sugar album, but with more like British tension thanks to Bowie.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, people that haven't heard it don't know that that album just rocks out
It's much
more than,
maligned.
yeah. I mean, it has a really weird dissonant guitar tone. Reeves Gabrel plays for The
The
Cure
Cure.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you can hear where there's not a huge separation between like the new Cure stuff that he plays on and what he did in Tim Machine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think don't both Hunt and Tony Sales play on it as
Yep,
well.
they did.
Who, of course, played with Iggy too. And I
Right.
don't know if they played with Bowie earlier or not. But yeah, they're amazing, and they've also played with Jack Grisham, one of them did in one of
Hmm.
his side projects, Tender Fury. But so really, really talented guys. I mean, what a lineup that was.
Oh yeah. And
I need to give those albums more of a listen. I've kind
yeah,
of had a cursory listen,
the
but I've never
second one
spoken
is
from
a
it.
little more rock and roll.
Yeah.
But the first one is
Hmm.
very abrasive, but in a good way,
Good. Yeah, I'll go back and have an explore of them.
for sure. All right, what
Cool.
else you got?
Okay, man. So again, it like the Wipers, I've gone back to America, and this time I've actually gone for TSOL, one of my all-time favorite bands, and an album called Beneath the Shadows, which to me, I don't know why this record doesn't get talked about enough. When people talk about TSOL, oh yeah, Code Blue, the song about, with dead people, whatever. Great record, Dance With Me. Beneath the Shadows it's so expansive. It's got these beautiful keyboards, courtesy of a guy called Greg Kuhn. I think that's what his name is. Anyway, Kuhn, I can't quite pronounce it. Who later played with Bob Dylan, and it's really shiny. It's very new wavy in places, but it's got the darkness of post-punk. Some of those songs feature in the film Suburbia. I don't know if you remember that
Hmm.
film by Penelope Spheris. But yeah, it's a really gorgeous record, and Jack shows what a fantastic frontman he is. I would say it's actually one of my favorite records. If someone was to say choose a Desert Island album, that's one of the ones I would go for. I love that band, and I just think it's a shame that this is a record that gets overlooked. I think the problem with TSOL, of course, I don't know if you know the story, drugs, obviously, the band fell apart. They kept the name and went with a different couple of guys. So I think people got confused. Well, who is this band now? They're playing hair metal. What's going on? So I think they got a little bit overlooked because of the internal conflicts. But people need to go back and check that record out, as far as I'm concerned.
Right, yeah. No, I think it's I like pretty much all TOSOL. I think
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe Revenge and Hit and Run are also two albums that I gravitate to.
Yeah.
Any band like that, like those guys, and I want to say the Addicts to some extent.
Hmm.
Um, they kind of crossed over into had some gothier years.
Yes.
And that's kind of my favorite point for any punk band to get to is to when they dress up for Halloween.
What?
And TSOL kind of crossed the line a little more, to where I
Yeah.
remember them sounding like 45 Grave at
Yeah.
times.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, they're a underrated punk band, I
They
think.
are. And you mentioned Revenge, which I really like. I also want to just chime in with Change Today as well, which is a brilliant record. It's kind of slightly different from Beneath the Shadows. It's like if Jim Morrison fronted, I don't know, like The Damned or something. It's really
Right.
odd, but really good. He's got a good voice. Um, and then, they started hanging out with Guns N' Roses and whatever. If you like that, you like that. It is what it is. But certainly the first two with Joe I like. But yeah, Beneath the Shadows, great stuff.
All right, my last pick, I'm going to choose a
Hmm.
newer band,
Hmm.
and this one is they're from Finland, actually.
Okay.
Uh, and it is Climax by Beast Milk.
Ah, yes.
And
Beast.
so Beast Milk went eventually turned into Grave Pleasures.
Hmm.
But they had like a rawer sound when it was Beast Milk.
Yeah.
And he has a like beautiful booming baritone voice that's almost like Danzig to some extent.
Yeah.
And he's played in a bunch of black metal bands. He's in Hex Vessel.
Yes.
Um, so he's very versatile as a musician, but I
Yeah.
wish he would do more, focus more on Grave Pleasures and I don't know why he decided not to do Beast Milk anymore. But yeah,
Yeah.
so that I think that as far as the new stuff, because there was this whole post-punk revival that
Hmm.
happened around 2010, where
Yeah.
you had bands like these guys. Ceremony is a
Hmm.
band I think whose name gets brought up in that conversation.
Hmm.
Bands like Night Sins and the Spectres and Alaric.
Hmm.
Um, So of all that, I think that this album's the most enduring as far as newer post-punk that's come out.
Yeah, I mean, I love Matt McNerney. Is that how you say his
Yep.
name?
Hmm.
Um, love Hex Vessel. I've not really listened to the Beast Milk album a lot, but I did review Plague Boys for Ghost Cult, of course, a couple of years ago, and I'm obsessed with anything sort of synthy and new wavy and that sort of sound. So that was right up my street. But he's a very, very talented dude. Seems like a nice enough, humble guy. And I will have to give Climax more of a listen because I have heard people like your good self, of course, rate it very, very highly. So I'll have to go back and properly give that a listen because I like his work. I saw Hex Vessel live last year, you know.
Okay. Yeah, see, I've
With,
never seen him live,
yeah,
but it makes sense that he would play over there more than he would play in America.
sure, absolutely. Well, it'd be easier for him to get to for a
Right.
start, I guess, But yeah, they were very, very good. And I picked up Hex Vessel's very first album, what's it called? Dawn Bearer or something?
Right.
Like a huge box set version of it, because that's one of my favorites of theirs. He's just a very versatile performer and love Grave Pleasures, but I will go back and give Beast Milk more of a listen.
So I think it's interesting of the albums that we picked of
Hmm.
what we left off, which would
Yes.
be the one band that we mentioned but did not include, Joy Division,
Ah, yes. Yeah, of
who's the
course.
band that most people would probably think of. But I'm gonna say this.
Yeah.
Those albums don't actually sound good sometimes. There's some good songs on them, but if you really listen to them through headphones,
Yeah.
sometimes they're a little clunky. Um,
Martin, well, remember Jello Biafra's infamous part on one of the songs, overproduced by Martin Hannett, take one or something like that,
right.
which is obviously a joke because Martin Hannett's like as far from overproduced as you can get. Yeah, the production isn't my taste, certainly.
But there's some good songs, and obviously, like if it was a top 10, I probably would have put Closer on it,
Yeah,
which I like better than Unknown Pleasures.
yeah.
And I thought I loved, I don't know, did you ever see that biopic called Control?
I think I have, yes, with Sam Riley. It was
Yep.
good. Yeah. I think it was directed by what's that photographer called? Anton Corbin, was it? Is
Right,
it his
right.
name? Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought they captured what they were doing pretty good. And I think that they have some great songs. I don't
Hmm.
know about great albums. Um, they would be in my top 20 for sure.
Absolutely. It's really funny with Joy Division. I mean, well, I'm planning to relocate to Manchester some point soon, but I live an hour away. And that band is ubiquitous wherever you go. Oh my God. I've got a mate who just constantly talks about Joy Division and Ian Curtis and this and that. And look, I like the music far more than New Order, that's for sure. But it gets a little bit tiring. It's like people banging on about the Beatles. It's like I
Right.
appreciate it, but enough's enough now. We kind of know the stories.
And I'll also say there's a band that I did not include in this because I see them separate from post-punk,
Hmm,
but people will wonder why I didn't bring them up because they're my favorite band. Is the
hmm.
Smiths.
Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
think the Smiths are post-punk. I think they were the kind of the precursor to indie rock,
Yes.
And at the
Yes.
time, maybe we could call them new wave, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose like college rock, new wave, that sort of thing.
Right,
Yeah.
but they're not. They're dark in a different way.
Well, if you take a song like Reel Around the Fountain, I mean, that's hardly full of shits and giggles, is it? I mean, that's a
Right.
bleak piece of work from old Mozza. Yeah, again, they're one of those Manchester bands that kind of, the 80s were a grim time in England. I mean, obviously, I can't speak for America, but they certainly set the tone as Joy Division did.
Oh yeah, and they were the thing I appreciate the most about like the Smiths is they were at the total opposite end of the spectrum of what was going on in America. America was
Yeah.
looking like jackasses with David Lee Roth jumping around. Um, and they
Yeah.
were the polar opposite
Oh,
of,
God. Or even worse,
Van
Sammy
Halen.
Hagar.
Yeah, oh God. Yeah.
That guy is just ridiculous. Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. All the hair metal, like Bon Jovi and what have you. Yeah, whatever.
The only hair metal that I liked was I liked LA Guns,
Yeah.
and I liked Wasp,
Okay.
and
Bit
because I
dark,
liked
I
Alice Cooper
suppose.
growing up. So,
Sure. Makes
um,
sense.
yeah, it has to be bands that are adjacent to that.
Yeah.
Faster Pussycat, I like. They turned into a goth band eventually. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, if you haven't heard Whipped, that's worth a YouTube spin.
All right. I'll definitely.
Um, and they hung out with Christian Death at, in
And
LA.
I'm sure they hung out with.
They probably had the same drug dealer.
Probably, I'm sure they hung around with Ron Emery of TSOL. I
Right,
know
yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's a
They're
guy called Robin Crosby. I don't know if he was in that band or not. I remember. I'm
and
not.
obviously, the guys in Discharge were into hair metal at some point in
Oh
time
my
too.
God,
So,
that terrible, terrible record. It is bad. It is poor. You know, Cal, we love you. You're a great vocalist, but you're not Robert Plant.
right. He
Give it
thought
a
he
rest,
was
mate.
for a second.
Oh
So
God.
what's an album before we close out?
Sure.
What's an album that had to ponder and left off, or somebody
Mm,
that you think deserves honorable mention?
sure. I'll just give us two very quickly. First was the birthday party and their compilation Mutiny slash the Bad Seed, which, their first album came out. I can't remember what that was called now, but then they did Junkyard, which basically influenced everyone in noise rock,
All
Jesus
right,
Lizard
for
especially.
sure.
Um, and then you had Mutiny the Bad Seed, which was an interesting record because it's the first album, first of all, that they fired the old drummer Phil Calvert and got this guy Mick Harvey in to play the drums. And he wasn't as good a drummer, but there was a very percussive element to that. And Sonny's Burning, and it's a um, really dark, kind of reminds me of the Gun Club in some ways. And so that was my first choice. And it's actually when, for me, Nick Cave was at his best. I'm certainly not into his Warren Ellis collaborations that just bore me to death.
I mean, when I don't feel like listening to Leonard Cohen, I like those albums.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly got into that as well. No disrespect to Leonard, of course. And then, of course, a big album that I really was wrestling with was a Pill and Metal Box.
Okay.
Because, yeah, I mean, I remember seeing an interview that John Lydon did in the late 70s when that album came out. And because obviously he gave interviewers a hard time, so it was their chance to get a bit of revenge on him. And they had the clip of, oh, okay, what do you think of this, John? And there was this bloke from Newcastle who was really laying into Pill and saying, oh, it was Johnny Rotten. He was in the Sex Pistols. He's a complete sellout and everything. I was like, mate, the Sex Pistols sold records. Pill didn't. I mean,
Right.
they sold some, but they were hardly, easy listening. So Pill, fantastic band. For the early stuff had Jar Wobble on bass, the great late Keith Levine, of course. I think Martin Atkins might have been in there, and it's a really, really challenging record, but very dub infused as well. I can't quite remember what the tracks were. Theme, I think, was one of them. Um, Religion, was that one of the songs on there? Can't remember the track listing, but yeah, it's very krautrocky as well. It's probably my favorite record of theirs, and definitely a huge influence on what I listen to now.
Cool. Yeah, I had also debated Daydream Nation by Sonic Youth,
Oh, nice.
but felt that had kind of crossed the line into shoegaze.
And Noise York, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
And I mean, they were way ahead of their time
Oh God, yeah.
anyways. So they were almost hard to place, depending on the song. It's like the blind man
God.
trying to describe an elephant. It depends on what song you hear as to who Sonic Youth is.
Did you ever hear
Um,
their very first self-titled EP
yep. Hmm.
and songs like A Burning Spear?
Yep. Yep.
I think that's a tremendous piece of work. That was definitely influenced by Pill,
Right.
undoubtedly. So that's a really good one. So yeah, they could be a bit of post-punk in there, but they're
There.
not really. They're way too distorted. And I hate to put it in this weird way, maybe a bit too American in a
Yeah,
way,
I could see that too. Yeah.
you know, as well, too expansive. It was starting to move into things like Dinosaur Jr., the early stuff, and There's a brilliant band that I love. I don't know if you've heard of them called Daz Damon.
Hmm.
Um, they're like kind of a little bit under the radar, but it was kind of those bands that were using noise and feedback. It wasn't quite shoegaze because it wasn't very dreamy, but it certainly had a lot of yeah, just a lot of noise and reverberation and what have you. So
Yeah, for sure. I can see that kind of falling in there.
yeah,
Well, awesome. We'll have to do this again. I am gonna put links to uh the fabulous Mr. Mills work
thank you.
so you can check it out. And go listen to some of the albums we've been talking about. I know I'm gonna have to dive into the Wipers and give some of the earlier TSOL a shot myself.
And I'll
And
return the favor with Bowie and Beast Milk.
oh yeah, you gotta listen to everybody needs to listen to Tin Machine. That's just how
Yeah,
it is.
no matter what the critics say,
Right, yeah. I mean, if nothing else, if you're a fan of The Cure, you need to listen to them because you got Reeves Gabrel in there.
of course.
And funny enough, Reeves Gabrel had a solo album that had I think it was Robert Smith sang on one song and
Ah.
Frank Black sang on another song.
I saw very briefly before we finished. I saw Reeves Gabrels in the mid 2000s live in Manchester at Night and Day. He was very, very good. Very good. He was on a solo tour.
Yeah, I saw him on a solo tour and I was the only
Yeah.
person there.
I saw Todd Rundgren not long after. He was terrible.
Uh,
Very, very bad. But yeah, Reeves was great. So yeah, definitely agree on Tim Machine and his work as well.
for sure. All right, well, awesome. We'll have to do this again. And
Sure.
thanks for coming on.
My pleasure. Take care, Will.
Take care, man.